besides being a world expert in cannabis, he is a senior advisor of OWC. And at some point, we are going to be calling up the senior management from OWC as well, our diamond sponsor. And remember, if you are in here, just a perfect example, we drew 4 cards and they weren't in here. And one of them was my brother. He's going to get it for me later. And we stayed true to our word. If you are in here, you will win a trip to Israel. I think we'll do a round trip. We've been doing a lot of one way. I think we're going to do a round trip to Israel. Just make sure your visa or whatever. No, visa, don't need a visa, right? I don't think you need a visa.
One class.
Okay, please warm up with Mr. Jeffrey Freeman.
Thanks. I think it's time almost for a 7th inning stretch after the Marlins presentation. I'm delighted to be here today and appreciate Jason giving me this opportunity to speak to everyone. My involvement in the cannabis industry has been a bit of a journey, which started during the summer of 2013. First in Colorado as an owner of recreational marijuana retail stores and a grow facility. Then in early 2014, Richard Greenberg, who is also here at the conference today, and I formed Intiva Inc. Intiva initially invested in cannabis growers in Canada. Richard is sitting right over there, and we, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, we then got involved with OWC Pharmaceutical Research, who I'll be introducing in a few minutes. Also during the summer of 2014, as I indicated, almost 3 years ago, Intiva invested in OWC Pharmaceutical Research, a company that is involved in the development of cannabinoid-based drugs in Israel. I'm delighted to have been involved with OWC, and I'm sure many of you have had the opportunity to speak with them and some of their management team here today over lunch or during some of the breaks. Along my cannabis journey, I wrote a book, Marijuana, the World's Most Misunderstood Plant. If any of you have not gotten it, Jeff Smirlick has got a supply over there. If we do run out of these, if you give Jeff your business card with your address on the back or give it to me and just put send book, we'll be delighted to get you a copy. If you want me to sign it during the cocktail reception later, I'll be delighted to do so. My book launch was in New York right after Thanksgiving in 2015, and at a lot of events like this, my book has sort of become my business card. I've said sort of people don't exactly read a lot of books these days, and I think that I've given away more books than are sold on Amazon, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I want to, before we get into the cannabis, I've been in Wall Street, as many of you know, and I think Jason and I were trying to figure out last night whether we go back 20 years or 30 years, knowing each other. I've never seen an industry that I'm more bullish regarding than this cannabis industry. Some of you may know I was involved in the first Bloomberg event on cannabis that was in December in New York, and I was talking to the head of consumer research for Bloomberg, and over lunch, we had a lunch meeting because they wanted me to help them with the cannabis events they're going to be doing this year. And he said to me, Jeff, we at Bloomberg don't know what to do with this cannabis industry. He said, the team he was involved with covers consumer products. You know, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, cigarettes, alcohol. He said the growth of all those products, of all those industries is essentially flat. He said, when we look at the cannabis industry and the annual growth rate in the United States from legal cannabis is 25 to 35%, how can we at Bloomberg ignore this industry? And that was a very significant comment. I was up in New York a couple weeks ago and met with Bloomberg again, and they're somewhat still perplexed as to what to do with this industry, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But before we go on, I'd like to ask all of you a question, just give you an alternative to that seventh inning stretch. How many of you are currently invested in the cannabis space? Just show of hands. Fabulous. How many of you are not currently invested in the cannabis space but are considering it? Okay, great. So we have some thinkers in the audience, mostly on the right side here. So the question that comes up for me to a large extent is, I'm often asked by people saying, I want to invest in cannabis or I want to invest in marijuana. What should I do? And my typical response to them is, what are you interested in investing in, marijuana or cannabis? And they say, we want to invest in cannabis. And so I often get somewhat of a blank stare to that question. And while I still consider cannabis an emerging market, it's really advanced quite a bit and evolved over the last couple of years. And there's a lot of ways for investors to play this industry. I think I was the first person in print in USA Today in November of 2013 to call this cannabis industry an emerging market. It's still emerging in a lot of the states here on the East Coast. It's still where we were in Colorado or the western states, California, Washington, Oregon, Nevada were a few years ago. But in the western states, things have evolved at a very, very fast rate. So what are the opportunities today? In the United States, you can invest in a state-licensed cannabis business, perhaps in a grow facility, perhaps a processor that manufactures tinctures, topicals, capsules, or oils, or a retail store or dispensary. You can also look at opportunities in the U.S. hemp and CBD industries. Or you can look at what I call pick and shovel opportunities. We all know what pick and shovel opportunities are for other sectors. It was said in California during the gold rush in the 1850s that the people selling the pick and shovels made more money than the miners. And I think there's really an analogy today, especially in the western states, where a lot of the companies surrounding this cannabis industry, there's better opportunities than actually investing in the growing, processing, or selling of this plant. Some of those opportunities are, security systems, selling packaging. We heard from Mass Roots, that's an ancillary opportunity, here today. So a lot of I wouldn't discount the opportunities in the pick and shovel aspects of the industry. And quite honestly, with my experience, having been with Richard owning a grow facility and retail stores in Colorado, we view to a large extent the fact that these pick and shovel industries are preferential to actually being involved in the growing, processing, or retail sales of the plant itself. But today we're here, we're focused primarily on publicly traded companies. That's my background going back too many decades. So I want to focus on public company opportunities in the cannabis space. But before I do, I think it's appropriate to talk about what came out of Washington last week. Because I know it's on everybody's mind, and my phone's certainly been ringing off the hook. Last Thursday, President Trump's White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, indicated that he expects states to have, quote, greater enforcement of federal laws under the Trump administration, even in states where cannabis is decriminalized or legalized. I think it's important to put that statement in context. Along with the District of Columbia, 8 states have legalized recreational cannabis. Voters this past November legalized recreational, or what people want to call it now, adult use cannabis in California, Maine, Massachusetts, and Nevada. With these new states, and this is very important, with these new states in the existing recreational or adult use states, 1 in 5 American adults can or soon will be able to smoke, vape, drink, or eat cannabis as they please under state law, but not here in Florida, I have to add. It's also important to remember that 28 states, plus the District of Columbia, plus Puerto Rico, more than half the number of U.S. states, have some form of medical cannabis, despite the plant's illegality under federal law. There's no question about it. Cannabis is America's fastest growing industry, estimated to generate more than $6 billion in revenue on the legal side this year, and estimates are somewhere between $25 and $50 billion by 2026. That's a huge industry. It's nothing that any of you should, it's something that all of you here should definitely keep in mind. I've received dozens of emails and phone calls since Spicer's statement asking me about the impact of the Trump administration's policies on the U.S. cannabis industry and what investors should do. My view is that the Trump administration is definitely a threat to state licensed recreational cannabis. I said recreational, and that's important to understand. It's also important to note that I think that the Trump administration will leave medical cannabis, state licensed medical cannabis, alone. As I've indicated in articles I've written over the past months, Trump's new Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, is not friendly to the cannabis industry. He's from a very conservative state, Alabama. I don't think he has any clue as to the level of popular support for recreational cannabis, especially in the western states. Nor do I think that Sessions cares. I believe that Sessions cannot tolerate the existence of a state licensed recreational regime, an industry that in his view is about kids getting high on street corners and then moving on to heroin. State licensed medical cannabis businesses are another matter. Spicer also said last Thursday, and I quote, "The president understands the pain and suffering that many people go through who are facing, especially terminal diseases, and the comfort of some of these drugs, including medical marijuana, can bring to them." That's a really important statement. With all the battles that Trump is facing, I don't think that he needs to be accused of taking medicine away from children or adults. So I think that my conclusion is the state licensed medical regime will remain intact, although there could be a change in federal policy. Sessions has also said, and I think this is very important too, that as the nation's top law enforcement officer, his job is to enforce the laws of the land, but that he will need to prioritize enforcement. That, prioritizing from the standpoint of expenditure of dollars and use of personnel. So I sort of read from that despite Spicer's comments, Sessions' statements indicate to me that going after state licensed cannabis businesses, both recreational and medical, are not exactly a priority for the Trump administration. And I think I'm probably going to be right on that, but we may get a tweet on that from someone this afternoon indicating that it's different. Most importantly, Sessions has taken a position not only with the federal illegality of cannabis, but other laws as well, that he, as the top law enforcement official in the country, if you don't like the laws, don't blame me as Attorney General, tell Congress to change them. And he's taken that position on a lot of things, again, but he's also making the statement that the enforcement priorities are subject to budgets, personnel available, etc. The bottom line, if you want to invest in state licensed medical cannabis businesses, I think you're okay. But if you're looking at state licensed recreational cannabis opportunities, Spicer's comments are a reason to proceed with caution. Let's move on a bit, since we are focused on publicly traded companies here today, and talk a bit about public companies in the cannabis industry, because that's what we're all interested in. In the U.S., there are only a handful of companies, cannabis companies, traded on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. At the top of that list are GW Pharmaceuticals and Insys Therapeutics. GW Pharmaceuticals has a market cap over $3 billion. Stock was up today. What? Doing what? Introduce who? Right now? Okay, no, I will introduce them. Okay. Sorry for that interruption there. anyway, I was just saying that GW has a market cap of over $3 billion. Insys Therapeutic has $850 million. Of those two, I'm more bullish about GW Pharmaceuticals. Why? They're in the pharmaceutical development business. The company I'm going to introduce in a few minutes, Ziv Turner, who Jason just reminded me to introduce, is also in the drug development business. Some people like to compare GW and OWC Pharmaceutical Research. Time will tell. Just commenting a bit on GW. GW Pharma, it's likely that the Food and Drug Administration approves Epidiolex, GW's drug for the treatment of Dravet syndrome, a form of pediatric epilepsy this year. That's actually a big deal for the entire cannabis industry because it'll be the first time that the U.S. government recognizes that there's any medical benefit from this plant. That's a very big deal. But they're moving on from these large cap New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ companies, of which there's only a few. There are hundreds of cannabis-related companies traded in the over-the-counter market. You know, we heard from two today, Mass Roots and Indoor Harvest. In a few minutes, we'll hear from OWC Pharmaceutical Research. And I think from my own standpoint, and I think Richard Greenberg would agree with me, the journey we've been on, which started with recreational cannabis in Colorado, has led us to two things. Understanding that the real money will be made not on the recreational side, even though it'll become a big industry. The real money in this industry will be made when somebody can go into CVS or Walgreens with a real prescription from a doctor and get a real FDA-approved pharmaceutical that has dosage information with it. That's what GW Pharmaceuticals is doing. That's the path that OWC Pharmaceutical Research is on. And so I think if you drill down on a friend of mine, Alan Brockstein, who many of you know follows the over-the-counter space in cannabis, Alan said to me that there's over 300 over-the-counter companies and have some cannabis involvement, but only a handful really have valid business models and plans, and I obviously would put OWC Pharmaceutical Research in that list. Another option for investors are Canadian cannabis stocks. Many of you know the market has taken off in Canada over the last few months. There are several reasons for it, including the fact that medical cannabis is legal federally in Canada. That's a big deal because it's illegal federally here in the United States. And also, Canadian cannabis producers can also now export cannabis to any country willing to legally import it. That's a big deal, although it's somewhat of a small market. And the other thing, the reason that the Canadian markets have taken off is that it's likely that they will have a federal recreational cannabis regime in place this year. We'll see. It was promised by the election of the current government and the Prime Minister. There are supposed to be preliminary rules out in April. I want to comment on one company that I think the stock was up again today, and that is in Canada, licensed producers, which are licensed by Health Canada. The largest one is Canopy Growth. It has a market cap of $1.4 billion. But I'd like to move on this. I said it was a journey, our involvement in this cannabis space, starting with recreational, getting involved with Canadian companies, and then moving on to what has really been a life-changing situation for us, Israel and Israel's role in cannabis. When Richard and I started our involvement in the cannabis industry in December of 15, we thought that the future was in the recreational side, not the medical side. In the spring of 2014, we became aware that essentially all, and I use the word all, essentially all medical cannabis research had been done, is being done, and will continue to be done in Israel. That was 3 years ago when we came to that conclusion. It's definitely, I spoke in Tel Aviv last February to 500 people there. I said it was the case last February in Tel Aviv. I'll be speaking in Tel Aviv in 3 weeks. I'm going to make the same comment again in 3 weeks, that Israel will retain its role. And that's what's able to benefit a company like OWC Pharmaceutical Research. And people say to me, why Israel? And that's a really good question. It goes back about 50 years ago. Some of you may have picked up my bio that I put together for a Bloomberg event. On the inside of it is a photo of me with Professor Raphael Mechoulam of Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I met him last year. He's considered the grandfather of cannabis research. Almost 50 years ago, when he was a young chemist, he was the first to isolate THC, the psychoactive component of the cannabis plant, which also has many of the medical benefits. The next year or so, he determined for the first time the chemical structure of CBD, which is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid that also has a lot of medical benefits. And so he is considered the grandfather of cannabis research. He's still involved, he's still in Israel, and to a large extent, that's why the industry has moved forward. But Mechoulam had a problem. He couldn't figure out why cannabis has the effect on humans that it does. And he went on to discover what was named in Israel the human endocannabinoid system, which is a system of receptors. And that was a very big deal. An interesting tidbit on this is when people say to me, why can't we do research in the United States? Well, the simple answer is it's illegal federally. It's virtually impossible to research this plant in the United States. However, the National Institutes of Health, NIH, here in the United States, hired Mechoulam and his team 30 and 40 years ago to do the research on cannabis that companies like OWC and GW Pharmaceuticals are able to benefit today. That was funded to a large extent by NIH because they couldn't do it legally here in the United States. If you remember nothing else that I'm saying to you this afternoon, I want you to remember one thing, and that is that Israel will continue to be the center of all medical cannabis research. And then I believe, and I hope nobody proves me wrong, that will go on for at least another 10 years. I'm being asked to speed up, and I'm almost there, Jason, so bear with me. I don't think Jason's going to invite me back to LA August 24th. Part of this has to do with being difficult to virtually impossible to do research in the U.S., which is why Israel will retain its role. But I want to talk about something that's significant. In June of 2014, which is almost 3 years ago, Richard and I flew to Israel, and we met the management team of OWC, who are here, some of whom are here today. Mordecai Bignitz, who's the company's CEO. We met Ziv Turner, who I will introduce, which Jason reminded me to introduce in a few minutes, and Dr. Yehuda Baruch. We also met, and some of you may have talked to Dr. Baruch this morning. Dr. Baruch headed up Israel's entire medical cannabis program for about 10 years. I'll let Ziv talk about that. But there's no one in Israel that knows more about cannabis and patients than Dr. Baruch. During that trip, and early in the summer of 2014, Richard and I, through Intiva Inc., we made a private placement investment in Intiva almost 3 years ago again. So we've been involved for over 3 years in this company. At the time, we were bullish we believed in the story, we believed in the people, we believed in the role that Israel had, and it was incredibly early stage. We wrote a check, and that was almost 3 years ago. And today, especially with some of the news that's come out and the developments that Ziv Turner will talk about in a few minutes, we made the right decision. And the future for OWC Pharmaceutical Research, we believe, is very bright. Early last year, OWC asked me if I would join their advisory board because I was an investor in Intiva. And I said I would be delighted to do so, and I know I've talked to quite a few of you on the phone who've had questions or sent me emails. And I will be here the rest of the afternoon, and I'd be glad to answer any specific questions. Again, if you didn't get one of my books, see me or Jeff Swerlick. And I'd now like to finally, Jason, sorry to slow things up here, introduce Ziv Turner, my friend, my colleague. OWC Pharmaceutical.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. If anyone knows anything about cannabis, this is the guy. How much time do I have? Like, are we on like 120 seconds? What are we on? Just keep up. So thank you for staying so long this entire day and just waiting to hear about cannabis. What it's all about. You heard a lot, and looks like you have a puzzle, you know, of what cannabis is and what it's not, and what's going on with some of the states and what's not. And I'm not going to talk about that at all. You heard a lot about it today. Something changed here in Florida in November. You guys here in Florida, you voted to add THC to the medical applications of cannabis to patients, for patients. That is a huge change. It's a huge change that we saw 3 years ago. It's going to happen in the market. And we said, okay, what is missing? What do we, as One World Cannabis, want to do in this market? What is going to make us different than all those hundreds of products on the shelves in dispensaries today, where you as users, as patients, hopefully you're not patients, but as other users maybe, you don't know how to choose. You don't know what to get, you don't know what to buy, you don't know what is the quality that you're getting. No one is giving you any assurance, you know, what it is, how it's going to make, what kind of an effect it has on you, you know, what's going to do to you, how to use it, how to consume. Basically, you're going to ask a bartender that I'm absolutely sure did not graduated his master's degrees from Caltech, you know, and you're going to ask those questions, those guys, you know, and you want to get some confidence in the product that you're buying. Are you buying oils? You're buying smoke, weed, as it used to be? Is it cannabis? Is it marijuana? You know, what do you do? What do you use? And when I met Dr. Baruch 5 years ago, and he was actually leaving at the time his position as the head of the medical cannabis unit of Israel. Dr. Baruch was the guy who established the entire program in Israel. He was the second director worldwide that was nominated by a government to implement an active medical cannabis program. And he fought his way with hospitals, with physicians, trying to teach them that cannabis can do good to patients, give them a better quality of life. And physicians, most of them until today, they see cannabis as a voodoo medicine. And the question on the table for us was, okay, so what do we do? How do we convince physicians that this is good for the patient? That's going to give them a better quality of life. Cannabis is all about that for patients. It's not going to heal anyone. It's not going to cure cancer and all of the worldwide disease and hunger, you know, and everything else. That's not cannabis. It's not about that. Just to give the patient a better quality of life. But how do we convince the physicians on one side and the patients on the other side that it's good for them? Because between all of us here, when you see someone using cannabis, actually smoking a joint, first thing on your mind, okay, there's a stoner, right? Nothing. Unfortunately, this person could be dying from cancer, and he's taken to easy Spain, but still, he's a stoner. That's how we see it. So we need to change that, you know, entire perception and how it's being conceived in the market. And that was our message. This is what we saw. This is our mission in One World Cannabis, in OWC. This is how we see our job to bring in products based on active cannabinoids to the market. We are going to prove the efficacy of those treatments through clinical studies, clinical protocols, approved IRBs, approved Helsinki's protocols. All the tests possible to bring the same quality assurance in each and every dosage that the patient is getting for each and every treatment. Patients do not need to guess what they are getting the next time they are buying another tincture, they are buying another product, another cream, another something. They need to know what's inside. The physicians need to recommend what's inside. They need to know how well it works for those patients. They need to monitor the patient's well-being. They need to know whether it's doing good for them and also when it's not doing good for them. Cannabis is not a solution for all type of problems, of medical problems. It has to be out there. And we draw all of our experience from Dr. Baruch's experience. He treated more than 15,000 patients single-handed with medical cannabis along other treatments. He's a trained psychiatrist. Of course, he was the head psychiatrist of the Israeli Defense Forces for a long time. Oh, similar to that, I'll show you that. Similar to that, but he's a retired colonel from the army. He knows what he's doing, and he's not coming from the science part of cannabis. We have scientists to do the cannabis, but cannabis for patients is a kind of a social drug. And you guys bring it to the table, experience with patients and physicians, how they look at cannabis, how they want to use cannabis, how they want actually to consume cannabis and say, okay, I'm feeling better now. And this is not out there because we cannot promise today, this entire industry cannot promise today to any physician that is safe to use. How many times have you heard about cannabis product that went through all the safety protocols required today, similar to the FDA requirements, in other drugs? You never heard of those. How many times you heard that a specific company, except for GWPH, all the other, moms and pops who are doing the cooking that in the backyard in Colorado or big facilities in Colorado, but how many times you heard they are using only one genetics, only one strain? How many times you heard about all the tests that they have been doing? The quality test, is it out there? No, it's not. This is the mission of our company. First mission that we have is to bring safe products and tested products with active cannabinoids for patients. And this is what we have done so far. We invested our efforts in creating those delivery systems, we call them delivery systems, which are actually treatments for specific medical indications. The first one that we have done, and it's still ongoing, we hope to close it very soon. It's a topical cream to treat psoriasis. You all heard about it, right? It's a skin disease, and we are testing the efficacy of our special formula with active cannabinoids and other ingredients. Of course, everything is protected with IP. Okay? How well it works for psoriasis patients. Soon we will be completing all of our studies and tests, and the goal is to have this product on the shelf this year. But the secondary goal is actually to go to all those physicians and tell them, listen, look at what we have done. We don't have a topical cream like all the other topical creams on the shelf. We have something that was tested. Look at our protocols. Look at our biodata that we have. Look at what we have gathered. Talk to the hospital, talk to the facilities. We want to present you our results. We want to present with you patients that have been treated with that, and you can see whether it works for them or not. And also we're going to implement a policy, our protocols and policies, how to manufacture exactly the same product week after week, harvest after harvest, year after year. It's a task to do, but someone needs to do it, because the way we look at cannabis today, it's not what's going to happen in 5 years from now, cannabis for medical use. That's not what's going to happen in the market. We need to get a pharma-grade level of products to all patients, because most of the patients who can use cannabis are not using cannabis, because they're afraid they need to smoke a joint, they never smoked in their life, they don't want to smoke. So this is one of our first mission, to bring that data with approved treatments and approved delivery systems. Like a topical cream is a delivery system. A joint also is a delivery system, but asking a physician to prescribe someone with a joint, seriously? And now we're talking about, Israeli-sized joints, normal ones, or the one we do in Havana, the one with the fun one. What do you do? What do you tell a patient? Do 5 puffs and then you're fine? What do you do? So this is the first message we have to the market. We are going to bring you safe, tested products. Every treatment, every dosage that you use is exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. And not only that, but you, patient, you know how to talk to your physician and actually express your well-being. Is it working for you or is it not? If it's not, we can look why not. Maybe we need to change something. This is the important part. The second delivery system that we are actually targeting to the market to be a replacement for smoking a joint is a soluble tablet. This tablet is very small. It has a fixed dosage, just like any other delivery system that we have, which will be used sublingual. Okay? And this is the second one to do. The other, let's say, arm that we have in the company is a regulatory arm. Dr. Baruch, as you know, as I already mentioned, and also Friedland mentioned, was the head of the cannabis unit in Israel. He knows everything there is to know about regulations, how to implement a program with a state or a country that are afraid of doing that. They are afraid of doing it because they don't know how the first day of rolling out such a program will look like. They don't know how many dispensaries, what type of patients, what medical indications. Every state here, right now here in the state, it's a chaos. Everyone is doing whatever they want, okay? And you could have a pain in one state, you cross the street, you're on the other state, and you either already a criminal, or you actually, or you just buy 2 ounces per day, which is a ridiculous amount in some of the states. But that's what we have, nothing. And this is what we're trying to bring worldwide, and you guys already working on that, and we are also working on that very heavily. I have 2 more minutes, right? And we are also going to push that in Europe, European Union. There's a lot of changes in that region as well, and you have to remember, Europe and Russia are 3 times bigger than the United States. I'm sorry, Americans, but it is what it is. Okay, they are very big, and the population is very big, and we have a huge market that is looking to get those specific treatments that we have. As a company, we are traded on the OTC. Our symbol is OWCP. We have been traded for a long time, and our goal is to go to the NASDAQ, and we believe that we can be the second or the third company over there, neck to neck with GW Pharma, with our products, with our treatments, with our studies that we want to do. We are doing today, and we are looking to do in the future. We are going to do pain studies as well, like fibromyalgia. We're going to do psychiatric issues like PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome disorder, and many more. Every one of those studies is done in educational hospital in Israel. All of them. Everything is approved by a full protocol by the state of Israel. As we announced a few days ago that we got the first IRB in Israel that was approved to run a safety study on a product with healthy volunteers. First time done in Israel, and everything that we do is protected with an IP. This is basically I don't have enough time, I'm sorry, but we can talk later. Our entire management is over there, financial management, my chairman is over there, our local representative from Maryland are over there, our guys are helping us do the business here, and this year is the year we go to the market. This is the message today. We have done our work, we have worked for more than 2.5 years, we have results, we have products. This year our products are going to be on selected states, already in dispensaries, and next year we are going to expand it here, and we are going also to start working in Europe for that. So thank you very much. If you want to hear more,
Thank you. Before anybody walks out, we are going to be raffling off the trip to Israel now, but you have to be in the room. So I would hold it in for a few more minutes unless